At this time, I'd like to introduce our featured expert leading today's session. We're joined today by David Lainstein, the co-founder and CEO at Atolio. Welcome, David. The floor is yours.
We've built secure AI for the public sector. Now, what we wanted to do is build a unifying layer across silos of knowledge that gives personalized answers to our users from fragments of information spread across disparate systems and give the personalized answers based on who they are, who they work with, and especially what they have access to read at the moment when they ask the question. Now, 6 years ago, when we started the company, people thought about this problem as Google for work, right? How do I search? How do I find a document that I'm looking for that is relevant to what I want to know? How do I find it across the sea of information? Just like I have I have this ability when I go to google.com, right? And in many ways, this is at the intersection of our experience building Splunk and PagerDuty. Splunk is obviously highly scalable search software running on-prem in the enterprise. And PagerDuty, we help support many of the world's largest internet services. Now, you've probably seen this quote before. If HP knew what HP knows, we'd be 3 times more productive. So this is from Lou Platt. And the funny thing, so Lou retired as CEO of HP in 1999. So I think this illustrates how long this problem has existed. People have called this the holy grail of enterprise problems. And it's fundamentally a human problem that's endemic to all large and complex organizations. How do we take the knowledge that's written down and the location is known only to the people who worked on it? And how do you make it findable to everybody who has access to it in a useful way so that they can make better decisions and improve readiness? Every organization struggles with this. The cost is real. And it's not just that the knowledge is siloed, it's also fragmented, right? A veteran analyst might spend 20% of their day just looking for the information that they need to do their job. In public sector, government agencies are some of the world's largest repositories of institutional knowledge. And yet, this data is trapped in these disconnected silos. So SharePoint, think Jira, Slack, legacy databases that have been built, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of statistics here that I'll gloss over. But I think everybody feels that this is in acute pain, and companies have been trying to solve this for decades now. Federal agencies are being asked to do the impossible, to accelerate mission delivery with fewer resources while managing an explosion of data. And the amount of the data isn't the only problem, though. It's this fragmentation. The data is scattered all over the place, and it needs to be gathered into one place such that you can make better decisions, improve readiness, reduce risk, and strengthen the performance of these programs. We call this the island of information problem, where you have these specialized tools. These bottlenecks exist in every organization where people are working in Microsoft ecosystem and Office 365, talking on Teams. You have Google applications, you have ServiceNow and Workday and Salesforce. So you have these specialized platforms for different use cases, but there's no sort of unified brain that spans these and gives a way to make this information accessible in a useful way. In fact, the name of our company, Atolio, comes from atolls. I'm a scuba diver. So we think of these little islands of data, and we wanted to find a way to unify these and actually unlock all of the value that's trapped in this knowledge. One example of this is as aging service members retire, agencies need to maintain the output with, unfortunately, a smaller force and find a way to take the knowledge that's written down in all those places where it's written down, but the knowledge of, think of a desk drawer, the drawer that this knowledge is stored in is in the heads of the officers who are retiring. How do you make that information accessible to new officers and help close this knowledge gap that can take months? GenAI has moved from science experiment to mission imperative. We've all heard about this. The gold rush of the last few years, though, has created massive security debt. The AI that corporate America is using is essentially a complete lack of security. In many cases, is completely unworkable for public sector organizations. We talked to Fortune 500 CISOs that are still trying to keep employees from putting company information into ChatGPT in 2026. They're still very much dealing with this challenge. The cost and the risk of shadow IT, personnel using public cloud models because the barrier to access secure infrastructure is too high, is unacceptable to our public sector organizations. Enterprises' missteps are out of the question. Unfortunately, corporate America's AI standards lead to national security events. On the plus side, AI can do amazing things today. that can solve real problems. There are real working production solutions. And I'll give you a couple examples. What we call this instant veteran status. So for every team member, how do you put all of the knowledge that they have access to into their hands in a useful way wherever they're working, including on secure phones? And how do you give them the ability to ask questions over dozens of systems in one place and get a verified and secure answer in seconds? Our view is that public sector AI should not require a trade-off between intelligence and security. General AI tools are risky for government because they often leak IP to the model providers or they're running on the public clouds themselves. And there's a lot that goes into being secure and private. We've thought about all of this from the very start of our company. Before we launched the first version of our product, we talked to 762 large organizations. And the number one thing that we heard is any solution to this problem absolutely has to keep all of the data and the stack off of the public cloud entirely, meaning no data leaves your control ever. And the complexity of being able to deploy this into your own infrastructure and to be able to leverage these models means solving several fairly deep technical challenges. Obviously, privacy, security, and data integrity are table stakes. You have access controls, so granular permissions, role-based access, understanding at the object level who can access each document or conversation, understanding how those permissions change in real time. Data privacy, data residency options, clear data usage and retention policies, protecting your IP, using open source LLMs or LLMs that are hosted by the private clouds where nothing goes to the public cloud while using AI, data security, so encryption, MFA or SSO, auditability, logging audit trails, reporting for compliance and investigations. So what you need is a combination of sovereign data control, VPC or native deployment. So think GovCloud, physical hardware, major private clouds, air-gapped environments, object-level access enforcement, permission-aware answers combined with audit-ready AI governance. Now, we'll kind of break down some of the non-negotiables for deploying GenAI as a high ROI asset and not a compliance or security risk. During this webinar, we'll address many non-negotiables that tend to get overlooked by vendors. Sovereign AI for enterprise knowledge. How do you ask questions over your organization's knowledge and receive intelligent answers without your data ever leaving your control? Access control and enforcement for AI and RAG. How do you protect sensitive data with document, object, and system level permissions that are enforced at query time? Ensuring that AI and RAG responses only surface content that users are authorized to access, and AI retrieval that drives mission results. We'll discover how modern AI and retrieval techniques leverage contextual signals like the collaboration graph to generate highly precise, mission-ready answers through intelligent RAG workflows. So we'll discover how to build a secure AI foundation that protects your data while giving your teams instant trusted access to the information that they need exactly when they need it. So we have this enterprise AI maturity hierarchy. Now, you aren't just looking for a chatbot. What you're looking to build is a foundation for organization-wide intelligence. While some organizations are racing towards agents, they're failing because they haven't secured the foundation. They want to jump right to the top. How do you jump right to this intelligence layer and have these autonomous agents? But they're not solving the foundation first. So the foundation, security, and permissions is crumbling. And to win, to solve this, you have to work your way up and solve the base of this pyramid first. On-prem, self-hosted, fully permission-aware, on private cloud or physical hardware. 3 non-negotiables. If you're evaluating an AI vendor, first look at these criteria. If they can't check these 3 boxes, they're not an asset, they're a liability. Sovereign AI and data control. Can you ask questions across your organization's knowledge and receive intelligent answers without the data leaving your control? The contextual intelligence. Do the modern AI and retrieval techniques leverage the contextual signals to generate the precise answers that actually use the graph of how people collaborate? And the granular permissions, do they protect the data with document, object, and system level permissions such that the user only receives an answer from what they have access to at this moment? Now, for highly regulated entities like the Air Force, AI must come to where the data lives and not the other way around. Step 1 is zero data egress. Bring the system to the data, ask questions across the knowledge without the data leaving the control. Sovereign AI data control. So we talked about the VPC native deployment. Data residency and sovereign AI is critical. And how do you protect IP and deploy the entire stack, including the connectors, the search index? Any model should run entirely within your own environment. And this includes talk about nothing leaving the wire. True zero trust security to us means don't trust the internet. The entire system, all of the connectors, all the data sources should be able to run fully self-contained as an application entirely off the internet. The other thing that we think is really important is decoupling the compute and the software. So we've created a highly disruptive business model that enables our clients to leverage their existing spend commitments for both the infrastructure and AI, and we charge for our product, the software. What we do not do is we do not bundle these costs and mark up the infrastructure and the AI costs. So we wanted to find a way where our clients or the organizations can retire spend commitments with private cloud providers, including GovCloud, and we just charge for the software. Contextual intelligence, we talked a little bit about Google for Work. And part of the reason that this was never solved is because nobody, including Google, figured out what is the analog to PageRank within large organizations. My co-founder, Gareth, likes to give the example. If I search for project notes, there are 10,000 things that say project notes. The missing piece is how do you know which project notes are the ones that I actually care about? And now fast forward, keyword search is dead. Accurate answers require understanding the collaboration graph of who somebody is, who do they work with, how do those relationships change over time? And you need to understand that in order to understand which project notes, in this example, or which documents actually matter to the individual, to the mission. And answering a question requires the system to interpret natural language through 4 layers: metadata, semantic filters, time, and identity. And it needs to understand what we call the we problem. When a person asks a question like, where's the spreadsheet we worked on last week? The system needs to be able to understand who that person considers to be we, like who is their working team at that moment, not just who's on the org chart, and thus provide a personalized answer to that person based on who they happen to be working with at that point in time without having to explicitly specify I want to involve these 3 folks. More on contextual intelligence, we talked about these information islands. Rather than having dozens of disconnected agents, so you have Copilot and Slack's AI bot and so on and so forth, what's necessary is a unified intelligence layer across all these systems that can give answers from the multiple systems and really unify these vendor platforms. Many times, the problem is not that you want to find the one document that can answer the question and everything is extremely organized. Many bits of knowledge are involved in answering a question from email, a little bit's in SharePoint, a little bit might be in Jira, a little bit's in Slack. And so how do you unify these platforms, take all of these fragments of information that all have a clue to the answer and stitch them together and give a coherent answer from across all of those source systems in one place? We talk about permissions. We have the object level, the document level, the system level permissions. It's critical for the system to mirror the source document, meaning a piece of content can only help answer a user's question if they can read it at the moment where they're running the query. These permissions have to be baked directly into the search index. Any solution needs to understand across all of the tens or hundreds of millions of documents, conversations, and emails, what set of users can read this thing at all times. And you need to have a real-time understanding of those permissions. It needs to be built directly into the search index. And that's the only way that a RAG system can respond with personalized answers, is if it understands it also in real time, not just what is the content, but who can read each snippet of content at all times. And intelligence is a liability if it does not strictly respect the need to know at the data layer. I'll give you a few examples here. So among organizations that experienced an AI-related security incident, 97% reported that they did not have proper AI-specific access controls in place. 63% of those organizations had no formal AI governance policy at all. One example of the shadow AI penalty is that breaches involving shadow AI, so think unsanctioned AI tools used by employees, oftentimes public cloud systems, cost organizations an average of $670,000 more than those with governed AI environments. The question is not whether public sector organizations will adopt AI-powered enterprise search. Many of your peers already are. The question is whether you can afford to do it given the risks on a public cloud. And so if proprietary information and internal assets are part of your advantage, the answer is no. We are the only AI-powered enterprise search platform. that delivers the productivity gains your teams need and the experiences that they expect from public AI solutions without requiring you to hand over your sensitive assets to someone else's infrastructure. Keep your data to yourself. At a high level, we built Atolio specifically because we saw these non-negotiables being ignored. Atolio is the one box that turns fragmented mess that we saw at the beginning into secure, sovereign mission advantage. So secure, self-hosted enterprise search. We're deployed at the Air Force for their Platform One organization, and we're proud to support them. But you really have to solve all of these problems. You have to solve how do you deploy on-prem? How do you build all of these connectors, understand who can access which objects across all these systems? You need to build search, and then you need to build relevance and understanding through things like the collaboration graph. And you have to put all of these components in one system to be able to unlock question answering expertise in a secure and useful way. So our unique value is that we are the only product that sits in the quadrant of fully self-hosted and also understanding the access patterns of who can access which object, again, at the document, object, and system level permissions. It needs to understand who has the right to see each thing, and it needs to mirror complex government hierarchy and security clearances and navigate all of that complexity. So what this looks like, we talked about a lot of this, but real-time permission-aware search across documents with enforcement at query time, complete data control, so the data never leaves your infrastructure. Permissions resolution happens entirely within your secure perimeter. Zero data exposure. Nothing goes to our cloud. Nothing goes to the public cloud. You control everything. You can bring your own keys and bring your own models. Zero trust architecture. So making it easy to deploy because we don't have to jump through a lot of the hoops that you would have to jump through if you want to use a traditional SaaS offering. And it's really suitable and built for organizations with the strictest requirements in mind. This is an understanding of how our security is built. We can go into more depth if anybody has questions. But this is an example architecture. And again, we run on your private cloud of choice, physical hardware in air-gapped environments, Gov Cloud like we do for the Air Force. But happy to take questions on this. Been called out on an earnings call as one of their core bets. So there was a slide that Michael shared where their big AI bets were Salesforce, Atolio, and Workday. And this is the mention of our SBIR that we won with direct to phase 2 with the US Air Force, proud to support the Platform One organization. And again, happy to answer questions on this as well. Before we open this up for questions, I'll show you a really quick example of what this looks like here. So I'm going to ask the question relevant today. Help me prepare to lead this webinar on secure AI for government. And again, we built the application that we always wanted in building Splunk and PagerDuty is we wanted this way to surface knowledge across all these places. And if the number one thing that we heard is any solution has to be fully on-prem, the number two thing that we heard is who knows about this thing is just as important as where's the thing, right? Because there are sometimes when you just want to find the person who knows about the topic and be able to reach out to them over Teams or go sit down with them and ask questions and gain context really quickly. So this is going to show how it's thinking about preparing to answer this question. But it's taking information from across many places from email and calendars and in our internal systems and Salesforce and so on and so forth. And it can really create this incredible experience where I gain access to all of this. It summarizes this for me. It tells me how to think about my talk. And so the amazing thing is that I have access to all of this. It's all completely secure, but it's this modern experience, right? That mirrors the kind of experiences that world-class consumer products have, except without exposing any of my information to the public internet. So I'd like to pause here. Happy to answer questions.
Yes, David, I am seeing one come through. Let me drop it in the chat.
Chris, do you want to talk through this? What is the FedRAMP authorization level, the ILs, the DoD?
Yeah, absolutely. David made references a couple of times to the work we're doing with the Air Force. Through that work, Atolio will go through a number of DoD impact level authorizations, most likely 2, 4, and 5, possibly beyond into the classified space. The other thing is, as David mentioned a number of times, Atolio was built from the beginning with security in mind, and it's self-hostable. So we are deploying Atolio and GovCloud for clients. So deploying in a FedRAMP authorized security boundary with an accelerator is very achievable. It's the technology is all the same. So we believe that we could get FedRAMP low, moderate, or high relatively quickly, probably within 3 or 4 months, which would be much faster than other vendors who created a product and bolted on security later. Happy to unpack that further if anybody has more specific questions.
Does the system automatically sync with existing AD or LDAP permissions, or do we basically have to rebuild and replicate all of those permissions manually within Atolio?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the whole premise behind the product is you don't have to manage anything around permissions. So the source of truth is always the data that is pulled from the data sources that we're indexing from. So the system connects directly with Active Directory or Okta or whatever IDP your organization is using. We pull the directory from there and we use that then to map back to the users in each individual source. And then those sources define the permissions for who can see what in the underlying index. The advantage of that is there's nothing else to configure. If you can have access to it, then you can see it in the index. And if you don't have access to it, then you do not. If you subsequently change a permission on a document in that underlying source, it's reflected in the index in Atolio as it streams in. So yeah, very, very straightforward. But the source of truth is always Active Directory and the underlying source. And in terms of how long does that take to reflect in the index, that depends on the source and how it streams data back to us. Most sources these days have a streaming model, so we can get data back within seconds generally. It may be minutes for some other sources, but basically we're only constrained by how quickly can the upstream system send the updates back to the product. But for many systems, that's seconds, and that's the seconds for whether the content has changed or whether the permissions have changed.
And which LLMs do we support? I think the answer you're going to say is everything's changing every day, and we're picking a handful of best of breed. But do you want to talk about?
It's very much client driven in terms of which models are most useful to a particular client and which ones are most performant at this moment in time. One of the great advantages of the product is it's pretty model agnostic, right? So instead of having to pick a product by a model provider and be completely locked into that model, even if it's surpassed in performance by another model subsequently, you could pick model A today and switch to model B tomorrow if that turns out to be better. So at the moment, we have 4 or 5 models that are first class that we support right now. We really optimize for each one, but it is a very fast moving space. So, it can be Anthropic's models, OpenAI's models, Gemini, open models as well. If you are running your own compute locally is what we're building at the moment.
A key point to emphasize here too is that we're not training the model on this data. It's not like we're taking a model and feeding all of the content in and trying to have the AI enforce permissions like that. At least for this foreseeable future, that is not a viable way to provide security. The only secure way to provide the service is to have a search and relevance subsystem understand of the universe of 10 billion documents, conversations, emails that you may have at your organization. What are the 500,000 that this particular person can access at this moment? And of those 500,000, what are the 10 to 15 fragments of information that we think are most likely to be able to answer the question? And so the LLM only gets those 15 fed into the context window. And again, this can be an open source model, however you're comfortable in terms of a security model, including fully air gapped. But there's no model training where we're training all of this data and trying to have the model do the guardrails. That's not the current reality.
Yeah, maybe we'll touch on the sovereign aspect here. So the entire product, as David mentioned, lives inside a Kubernetes cluster. And that cluster could be running in AWS, could be in Azure, could be in GCP, but it could also be a cluster running on your own hardware, for instance. We mean by sovereign, we mean your security perimeter, right? And so we as a company have no access to that cluster, nor do we need it. This thing is self-sufficient. The large language model, the inference model right now, if you're running an AWS, you would connect out to the Bedrock deployment of that model hosted by AWS, again, remaining inside your security perimeter. But for an air gap deployment, if you have sufficient hardware on site, enough GPU on site, then you could host your own model and really be completely off cloud even altogether as well.
Yeah, I was just meeting with the head of collaboration at a highly siloed and security conscious technology company yesterday. And for them, sovereign means, we have a building and only certain people can go in this building, and we develop certain products in this particular building. So for them, they would create a deployment of Atolio just for the folks in that building that only have access to those systems, and everything is entirely firewalled, even from the rest of the company.
To the fine-tuning point here, nothing comes back to Atolio, nothing leaves. So at the point David's putting the question here into the product, that user interface is served up by a machine inside the cluster inside your environment. It's deployed to another service inside that environment. The data store, the index, etc., is also inside that cluster too. The inference layer reaches out to Bedrock, running inside the cloud account that you manage yourself. Doesn't come out to us. There's no fine tuning. There's no other data leaving. That's it. It really is completely private.
And other providers have had the idea that they would create this cross-customer model. Part of the way that Google.com solved search is by having a lot of data, all the search queries that everybody's asking, and all of the content on the internet. And so there's one of our competitors where the founder was from Google, and had this idea of creating a cross-customer model, basically combining everyone's data to run the part of the service as a public cloud offering and solving relevance that way. And that is obviously completely unacceptable to anybody who actually cares about security. So we built this. It's fully within your control. Nothing goes back to us. You control the networking. You can audit that nothing goes to the public internet. It's completely auditable as well. The custom connectors one I'll take. The short answer is it depends. There are connectors that we will build. For sure, we'll end up having a few hundred that we build and support ourselves. If there is a system that, for instance, is homegrown, like a homegrown ticketing system that we haven't seen before, we may charge for that. But we're also a heavily partner-focused organization. So we have a network of partners, including Caresoft, and some of those partners very much like that custom development work. They may have built the application in the first place and know how it works. And we will provide an SDK to make it painless as possible to build this, understand the permissions, and send the data in and stream it into your Atolio deployment. To answer which specific federal systems, SharePoint and Google Drive and so on, do we support out of the box? Think right now so all Microsoft systems, Google, Atlassian, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and so on. And we're building more connectors all the time, but we support all of the major providers as a starting point. Gareth, do you want to talk about this? If we're hosting, what is the recommended infrastructure?
That's a little bit of a how long is a piece of string kind of question. It really depends on the size of deployment, the amount of data, etc. The underlying data index is a replicated multi-node, system. So, the typical deployment starts at 6 or 8 nodes for the whole cluster and moves up from there. But we'd really need to talk about how much data, how many people concurrently using it, as to how large that cluster needs to grow.
Gareth and I were early engineers at Splunk, and we saw a pretty similar issue with Splunk. Is it depends how much data is being generated, how many people are running concurrent queries, and so on and so forth. So if we have some basic metrics in terms of how many people, how much data, and how much usage, we can pretty quickly get to a recommended architecture. And again, from a security perspective, it's everything all the way down to air-gapped. So GovCloud, major private cloud, or air-gapped, or physical hardware, whatever it is that you're comfortable with. Chris, the acquisition vehicles question.
Well, through our co-hosts here on the webinar, Caresoft, we've been added to their SOUP contract and a large number of other state and local contracts. We have also submitted to be added to the GSA schedule. So there should be no shortage of acquisition vehicles. And if anyone has certain vehicles that they're required to use or special interest in, just reach out to one of us or the Caresoft team, and we can make sure that we add the product to that.